On today's episode of Let's Talk Drones, we have leaks for the DJI Mavic 4 or the Air 3S. I don't know. We have the leaks. So let's talk drones. What's up? It's Chris, the Drone Geek, and welcome to another episode of Let's Talk Drones. Let's Talk Drones is brought to you by the Droning Company, the #1 online resource for commercial remote pilots now worldwide. Make sure you check them out online at thedroningcompany.com, and make sure you get subscribed to their YouTube channel as well. Just search The Droning Company here on YouTube. Lots of great content there, including videos made by yours truly, as well as some videos featuring friend of the channel, Sam Karp from Sam Karp FPV, and tons more. The Droning Company, the #1 online resource for commercial remote pilots worldwide. So I'm gonna ask for your grace and your understanding through this video because over the weekend I suffered from a pretty quick but really severe cold, and I'm still sort of getting over that. I'm a little bit stuffed up today, and so if it's hard to understand me in some parts of this video or I stumble over some words, apologies in advance. I'm doing my best. I just couldn't wait to make this video because all of the information in it is super exciting. And I've got some well-formed, based in fact speculation I'm going to offer you as well as to what we can expect, because new information is leaked out of DJI regarding a potential new drone. Now, as I was struggling with my cold over the weekend, I was scrolling through X, as you do, and I came upon a tweet from our friend Jasper Ellens at Jasper Ellens 27 Leaks. And this tweet included this photo. Now, as you can see here, we have what appears to be a new drone from DJI sitting out in the field during testing. Now, that is exciting stuff. Now, along with this tweet, Jasper offered some speculation of his own when he said that this appears to be the Mavic 4. That's where I'm going to break in here and tell you that this is one of those very rare instances where I believe that our good friend with an amazing track record, Jasper Ellens, is wrong. I do believe he's wrong. I don't think this is the Mavic 4, and here's why. Upon further research on the potential leak of a new drone from DJI, I came upon some tweets from a source called Quadro News on X. Now, these tweets included photos and a video that actually shows the drone in flight. That's pretty exciting stuff, especially since it's flying, because that means it's pretty far down the development pipeline, which means we could see this drone relatively soon. But before we get to that video, let's start with this picture. Now, as you'll see here, this is the fuselage of the drone, all folded up in its compact form factor, and it looks strikingly similar to the DJI Air 3. That's the first giveaway. You just look at this drone and it screams DJI Air 3. When we go forward to another picture and even look back at the picture that Jasper leaked, you can see the camera body is very, very similar to that of the DJI Air 3's camera body. Finally, when we look at the video of the drone flying, it's hard to tell because there's not a lot to scale it against, but this looks like more of a small to mid-sized drone, which is what I'd put the Air 3 in. That's the category that I put the Air 3 in. I'd put the Mini in a small category, I'd put the Air 3 in the small to mid-size, and I'd put the Mavic 3 in a mid-sized drone category. So that's what I think we're seeing here in this flight video. And if that's not enough for you, I've done some research based upon DJI's release schedules in the past, or the rate at which they release certain iterations of certain drone lines. When we look at the Mavic series and how regularly DJI releases a new iteration of the Mavic drone dating back to the original Mavic Pro, you'll quickly figure out that DJI, just through a little math, releases a Mavic around every 2.3 years. Now, you could get bogged down in the specifics of, well, there are different versions of the Mavic 3, and do those count as new iterations? Because that would drastically lower the regularity at which DJI releases a Mavic. But I'm not looking at that in this specific case. I'm looking at steps. So I'm talking step by step by step by step. Drone 1 to drone 2 to drone 3 to drone 4. It's roughly every 2.3 years. And when we consider that the Mavic 3 Pro was just released in 2023, that would be the latest iteration of the Mavic series of drones, it is way too recent of a release for DJI to consider releasing a Mavic 4. Just way too soon. However, when we look at the Air series, we can figure out with that same math that DJI releases an Air series iteration around every 1.6 years. There was a larger gap in that schedule between the Mavic Air and the Mavic Air 2, but once we got to the Mavic Air 2, the frequency at which DJI released iterations of the Air picked up, and it seemed like DJI was going to adopt this half-step method with the Air series of drones by releasing the Mavic Air 2 and then the Air 2S, and then the Air 2S to the Air 3, and now, fittingly enough, we're looking at possibly the Air 3S. When we also consider that in a little less than a month's time, the DJI Air 3 will be celebrating its 1-year anniversary available to consumers, you can start to do the math and see that everything's lining up. Even though it's not a perfect 1.6 years, we are much closer to the 1.6 year projection with 1 year from the last release than we are the 2.3 year projection for the Mavic series. So that tells me, along with the images and the videos that all but confirm this is the Air 3S, that we are going to see the DJI Air 3S this year. Now, I didn't take you down that rabbit hole of mathematics and figuring out release schedules for nothing. I want to talk a little bit and speculate on what we might be able to expect from the DJI Air 3S. A disclaimer here. Take everything that I'm about to say with a grain of salt. This is all based in trends that I've seen from DJI, so even if I might be wrong, I don't think I'm going to be far off with my projections, but these are just projections and speculation. This does not mean this is what we're going to get with the Air 3S. Just indulge me for a moment and get excited with me about the potential of this new drone. Now, as long as we're looking at trending data regarding the releases of new iterations of DJI drones, let's keep that same energy when we look at the potential upgrades from the Air 3 to the Air 3S. When we consider the Mavic Air 2 and its sensor size, we had a 1/2-inch CMOS sensor with the Mavic Air 2. And then we think about how they upgraded that with the Air 2S. We got a 1-inch sensor with the Air 2S. I think we're going to see that same type of upgrade with the Air 3S versus the Air 3. Now, with the Air 3, a lot of people felt that DJI took a step backwards because they reduced the sensor size from 1 inch to 1/1.3 inches. Now, first of all, that's not a huge downgrade in size. That's equivalent roughly to, I think, 0.78 inches in size when you think about the sensor, a 1/1.3 inch. So it's not a huge downgrade, but I will admit it was a little bit of a step backwards. Now, DJI made up for that by including stacked sensor technology as well as bare processing to take the native 12 megapixel photos from the Air 3 up to 48 megapixels after the processing. It was really cool how they sort of made good on that step back in sensor size, but people were still left wanting the larger sensor, and I think that's where DJI is headed with the Air 3S. I think that we're going to see a 1-inch sensor and the DJI Air 3S, and it's also going to have the stacked sensor technology as well as the option for bare processing from 12 megapixel photos to 48 megapixel photos. Now, I think 12 megapixel is where they're going to go with that, but there is potential with that larger sensor for them to upgrade it to a 20 megapixel sensor. Time will tell on that. The other thing time will tell on is whether or not the telephoto lens that is included with the Air 3 will also get the same sensor size upgrade. Will we see a 1-inch telephoto lens? I'm thinking no, but again, only time will tell. Next, let's talk about video resolution. The Mavic Air 2 had a max video resolution of 4K, which is plenty, especially when you're considering landscape shooting with a drone. The Air 2S, though, doubled down on that and shoots at a max resolution of 5.4K. The caveat with this is that you could only shoot at 30 frames per second, which I don't think was a big deal to most end users because having the larger video meant that there was more flexibility in post and editing because you were editing 5.4K video as opposed to 4K video. That added flexibility is always helpful when it comes to editing and getting the look that you want with your shots, even if you are limited to 30 frames per second. That's especially not a big deal if you're exporting your projects at 30 frames per second or 24 frames per second. I'm not sure that we're actually going to see an upgrade in video resolution between the DJI Air 3 and the Air 3S. There is potential, of course. I'm not going to ignore the probability that could exist there in terms of an increased video resolution. What I think DJI will actually do is I think they're actually going to maintain a 4K resolution and maybe add a frame rate that wasn't previously achieved in equivalent or lesser drones. I'm thinking like 4K at 120 frames per second, not forcing you to shoot video in a forced slow-mo mode. It will actually be 4K in real time at 120 frames per second, which means that you can slow your footage down even more. Now, I don't know if this is really a great trade-off. Personally, as somebody that edits a lot of videos, especially drone videos, I prefer the larger and more clear resolution of something that's like 5 or 6K as opposed to super high frame rates. Now, not in every situation, but when we're talking again about mostly landscape videos that are going to be very wide and sweeping in a way that it's hard to tell if there's a lot of movement, you don't really need to slow that footage down very much. There are obviously exceptions to that. As I said, if you're shooting a subject with your drone, you may want to slow the footage down in that regard. But if you're just shooting B-roll and it's a lot of wide shots, a lot of landscape shooting, slow-mo doesn't really do anything for you, if I'm being totally honest. And once you get past 60 frames per second, it's sort of a diminishing return. The next thing we need to think about is flight time. Now, when we look at the Mavic Air 2 versus the DJI Air 2S, they use the same battery. The same exact battery was used on both drones. Now, the interesting thing about that is that the flight time was actually reduced from the Mavic Air 2 to the DJI Air 2S. It went from 34 minutes on the Mavic Air 2 to just 31 minutes on the Air 2S. And the reason for this is with a larger camera sensor, with more advanced hardware, with hardware that demands a little bit more power, you're going to see a decrease in total flight time because it's drawing more power off of the battery to keep everything working the way it should when you upgrade the tech. That's just how things work. And I think we're going to see the same thing with the Air 3 to the Air 3S. We're going to see the same exact batteries used on both drones, which is great news. If you own an Air 3 and you want the Air 3S to go with it as sort of like the main drone and then your Air 3 can be the backup, you still have all of the accessories from your Air 3, which should, hopefully, hypothetically, work with the Air 3S. So that's good news, but I think we will see a slight reduction in flight time from 46 minutes on the DJI Air 3 to probably somewhere around 40 minutes on the Air 3S. Finally, the range and signal penetration. I don't think we're going to see a change here. I think we're going to keep the same transmission system that we saw. It was actually the debut of this transmission system when the Air 3 was released, OcuSync 4. I think OcuSync 4 is going to be what's on board the Air 3S, so I think that we're still going to get that 20 kilometers or 12.4 miles that we saw out of the Air 3 in the Air 3S. Now, all of that in mind, the next question you may be asking yourself is, how much will this cost? Now, I can't say for sure, and DJI tends to do better in pricing more often than not than I'm able to project. But I will say this. When you consider that the Air 3, when it released, was around $1,100 for just the drone, the RCN2, and a single battery, I think that we're going to see the same combo go for around $1,200 or $1,300 with the Air 3S. It's just a little bit better technology, and let's face it, I think most people are willing to pay that in light of what's going on with the legislation here in the United States. It may be one of the last drones that people can purchase from DJI and be able to use long term, so I could see DJI doing what companies do best and try to capitalize on that by making a few hundred extra bucks off of people when they're really thinking this might be the last time they can purchase a DJI drone. Who knows? I'm projecting, though, between $1,200 and $1,300 for the DJI Air 3S.
And it's bonus question time! That's right, it is bonus question time. Today's bonus question is it worth the upgrade?
Okay, I will drop the game show host impression for the answer on this question because I am aware that that would be entirely too annoying if I maintained that. When it comes to whether or not you should buy the Air 3S, it ultimately comes down to what you want and what you need, and only you know that. I can't really advise you on that because I don't have knowledge of where you're at specifically. What I will say is this: if you've got an older drone, or you've got a drone that's a little bit smaller, maybe a little less capable than something that we might be speculating on to be slightly better than the Air 3, it may be worth a consideration. Until we get our hands on the technology itself, until I get my hands on it, which I'm going to try to get something in the works with some people over at DJI that I know to get an Air 3 over here, or an Air 3S rather, over here so I can test it. Until I can actually see what it's capable of, I can't rightly advise you on whether or not you should definitely buy this drone. But if our speculation is at least half right, I would say if you've got an older drone or a less capable drone and you're looking to upgrade and buy a newer drone, the DJI Air 3S may be worth consideration. If you've got something that's a little bit newer, I'm talking as new as the Mavic 3, the original Mavic 3, or newer, and that includes the Air 3, the Mini 3 Pro, the Mini 4 Pro, etc., just stick with what you've got. I mean, I can't tell you what to do. If you want to go out and get a second drone or a third drone or fourth drone, wherever you're at, by all means, if you've got the money, go do it. But what I will say is if you've got a newer drone, you don't really need what the Air 3 is going to do, because the drones that start with the Mavic 3 and anything newer than that, they're going to be as capable, if not more capable, than what the Air 3S brings to the table. That's just my opinion. But what do you think? Let me know down in the comments below. If you liked this video and you think what I have to say is pretty valid, leave a thumbs up down below. Helps me out a lot, helps get this video out into the algorithm to more viewers like yourself. If you really like this video, you love drone content shot by drones, about drones, and for drone pilots, my friend, this is the channel for you. Make sure you get subscribed if you haven't already, and while you're at it, hit that bell icon. It'll give you a notification every time I post a new video. Until next time, I'm Chris the Drone Geek, and I am out of here. See ya!
Yo, what you say? Steady screaming, YOLO, rockin' polo,